Chapter 5 Show and Tell. When it's time for social studies Tuesday morning, I lay everything on the table that Mrs. Casey moved to the front of the room. The bobbins, the pens, the gear, the doorknob, the scissors, the hammer, the thimble, the needles, the antique eyeglasses. I have a small assortment of buttons, and I empty out carefully at one end of the table. It all makes an interesting display, like you'd see at a museum, or an antique store, or my room. I talk for a minute or so and tell everyone what Grandpa told me about the history of the mill. And I explain how the things on the table came from different times during its life. Mrs. Casey asks the class to gather around, and as they do, she picks up the scissors. My stomach tightens up like a little fist, and I think how I might have just made a bad face. Because from now on, whenever I look at those scissors, I'm going to have to remember two things: my wonderful afternoon with Grandpa and Mrs. Casey's pink fingernail polish. She opens and closes the long blades, and they make this great metallic swish, ending with a sharp snap. A tailor must have used these to cut through several layers of wool or cotton at the same time. I have never seen shears this large before. Following Mrs. Casey's lead, the kids start touching and inspecting everything. Just what I was afraid of would happen, but I don't really blame them. This old stuff is irresistible, like holding 100 years with one hand. Then, a complete surprise, a bunch of kids start going nuts about the buttons. A button shaped like a tomato? There's a ship on this one. Look at the super bright yellow. I love it. A starfish, and there's a baseball. That gold one with the eagle, it's gotta be off an army uniform. Ooh, diamonds! With all the bright colors and some of them glittering in the pile, the buttons look sort of like jewels that spilled from a treasure chest. Everyone keeps poking through them until Mrs. Casey says, "Thank you for sharing all of this, Grace. Let's get back to our seats now, and please take out your notes from the homework reading." The Birmingham Mills show is over, just like that. I gather up my stuff, and in another 15 minutes, it'll be lunchtime. It's as if my show and tell never happened, which is just fine with me. A second surprise comes about a half an hour later in the cafeteria. Taylor says, "Do you have any of those buttons with you?" "Could I look at them again?" From the end of our lunch table, Hank pipes up, "Me too." So I take the bag out of my my backpack and pour the buttons onto an empty cafeteria tray. Down the center of the table, everyone leans in to look and touch, everyone except Ellie. She nods at the tray and says, "My mom used to do all kinds of sewing and knitting and quilting, and so did both of my grandmothers. We've got a drawer at home that's loaded with buttons, a lot more than that." Taylor says, "We've got buttons at home too, but these are way better." Brooke nods. "I've seen some buttons at my house too." "Hey, I've got an idea," Ellie says. "How about if we all bring some buttons tomorrow? We can look at them after lunch, just to see what everyone has." This is the right moment for me to say the truth is, no matter how many buttons anybody has, I've got way more. But I don't say a word. And the other kids at the table are saying, "Yeah, and I could find some buttons and cool and count me in." And I can't help thinking that if I had made this suggestion, everyone would have thought it was dorky, especially Ellie. As I bag up my buttons for the second time today, I understand what's happening. Ellie likes to be the one who has the most and the best of everything. She isn't too obnoxious about it, not usually. But I've seen her act this way before. I know exactly why Ellie suggested that all the kids at our table should bring some buttons to lunch tomorrow. And this is not just a theory. It's because Ellie is totally sure that she has the most and the best and the prettiest buttons in the universe. And she wants to prove that to everybody. But of course, Ellie doesn't have the most or the best or the prettiest. I do, probably. And maybe for the first time ever. I think about this the whole rest of the school day. And even as I'm doing my homework after dinner, Ellie and her buttons are right here inside my head. So just before bed, I begin filling plastic sandwich bags with buttons. I'm aiming for quality, variety, and especially quantity. I stop at 8 bags. That ought to do it. Because if Ellie tries to turn tomorrow's lunch time into a big show off session, then she's got to get a surprise from me.